Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. This show is brought to you by Auto Rescue Tools and Isaac Rodell. If you've been looking for a programming laptop, but you're not sure which one to buy or how to set it up, especially if you want to program multiple brands. You know, you've got some domestic vehicles, you've got European vehicles. Can the same software go on the same laptop? What size hard drive do I need? All those questions. Isaac's your guy. He can custom set up programming laptops that are ready to tackle any make or model. I got one of these laptops myself, and I can say that it is outstanding, and it really streamlines the process by having everything you need in one device. So if you're looking for something like that, I highly recommend checking out autorescuetools.com. You'll also find scan tools, diagnostic equipment, key cutting equipment, and much more. Check out the link in the show notes. I highly recommend it. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping. I'll be your host once again for this week's show. Thank you so much for joining me. You got just me on the show this week. I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite tools that only costs you $5.95 if you go on Amazon, buy the same one I did. And yes, I realize the title of this episode is a little clickbaity, but it's true. So I will say that if you buy this tool and you learn some basic electricity fundamentals, and then you go out there and you find diagnostic work, this tool will make you that much back. You got to have enough work to do. So how did I calculate this number? Well, first off, okay, what's the tool? It's a test light, an incandescent test light. All right, now maybe you just turn the episode off right here because you're like, okay. But I'm channeling my inner Paul Danner for this episode. But like really in real life, I use this freaking tool all the time. And I try to convince everyone else who's doing 12-volt electrical diagnostics on anything, even up to a 2025, I don't care, to use one of these. Have it, use it. It's an awesome tool. If you understand electricity, you understand what it does. It's huge. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. But how did I get the $10,000 number? Did I just pull it out of thin air? Not really. I looked at the total amount of diagnostic dollars I have done up until like right now in 2025. And then I did some rough math to figure about how many of those I utilized the test light in the diagnostic. Now, probably only a handful of those I did just with the test light, right? Generally, you're going to have a scan tool involved in just about every car. And if you include the pre-scan, okay, I have it involved in every diagnostic. But some of them, did I need the scan tool to get there? Probably not. But how many diagnostics did I use the test light in determining what was going on with the vehicle? Maybe it was the only thing that I needed. I bet you that number's conservative, to be totally honest. I was generous on the conservative side of things when I came up with that number. Plus, it's a nice, easy, round number. $10,000. Sounds great. Okay. But seriously, you can turn a $6 tool into $10,000 with your knowledge and enough broken cars in front of you and people that are willing to pay you to repair them or at least diagnose what's wrong with them. So let's get into it. How do you use this tool in diagnostics? And maybe you already do and you're like, I don't really care. I understand how to use a test light, but I'll share with you today maybe a few ways that you haven't considered using an incandescent test light. Or maybe you just love to use some other tools out there, scope, power probe, LED test light. I don't know. There's a bunch of other tools out there. But I'm here to try to convince you why an incandescent test light is really useful beyond just the normal things that you would think of. Now, one of the biggest reasons I love to use a test light in most applications is because it commands a load on the circuit. And if you've taken one of my classes before, I have an electrical analysis or circuit analysis class where I talk about a bunch of different ways to assess electrical circuits and how to think about electrical circuits. And I break it down into two main categories. Either that circuit is sending information or the circuit is performing work. Right. So if you think information like a data circuit for CAN communication, if it's doing work, think of a headlight bulb, right? We're talking heat, motion, magnetism, something like that. We're performing some sort of physical work. And I think about those circuits differently, and I treat them differently, and I may test them differently. And for any circuit that does work, I want to be able to load that circuit to make sure that it can carry the current in order to do the work, right? Whatever the load or loads in that circuit are, I want to make sure that that circuit has the ability to carry the current to said load, right? And a test light is a great way to do that. Not the only way. And of course, you have to consider what is the actual amount of current that said load uses, and does my test light equate to that, right? You could have a situation where your test light draws more current than the load in the circuit, but you could also easily have the situation where your test light does not draw anywhere near the amount of current that a particular load uses in a circuit. So then, how useful is it at that point? You'll have to consider that. Of course, that all starts with, understanding a couple things here. And I want to start with this, and I've had this in my class. I probably talked about it on the show before. I did this when I was teaching at the college. It's a really powerful example of why the test light's important in a lot of circuit testing. And I remember when I first experienced this out in the field, because I didn't realize this at first when I was out there testing stuff with my meter, and this could be with a scope too. But try this. Take your meter, take your scope, whichever one of those two, you're measuring voltage on a circuit, right? Okay, 12-volt circuit. Take a jump pack or a battery, doesn't matter. Hook your black lead of your scope or your meter up to the negative terminal of the jump pack or the battery, and then take the red lead and hold it in your left hand, and then touch the positive terminal with your right hand. You will measure pretty close to battery voltage on that meter or scope. Okay, it's going to depend on the impedance. The scope's generally going to be a little bit lower than the meter, but a meter will show you 12 point something volts on a fully charged battery. Okay, that's through your body. Switch the meter over to ohms, measure the resistance. You're going to be like 1,000,000 ohms of resistance or more. Depends on how hydrated you are that day. And for sure, you're not going to be able to carry any usable current for a circuit that needs to do work through your body. But open circuit voltage testing, this is why you really shouldn't do open circuit voltage testing. You want to use your voltage drop. There's plenty of classes out there on that. But hey, maybe you don't know the circuit is open in the car, right? That's a real potential thing that you could run into. The fact of the matter is, you can read voltage through a large amount of resistance on a circuit that is open. Okay, if it has that unwanted resistance. Through your body, you can read that. A test light will not light. Try the same thing with a test light. It's not going to happen. Your body will not carry enough current from a 12-volt system to light that test light. It's not going to happen. So your test light would show you that hey, this isn't a usable path for current. We can't perform the work. Where your meter is scope, unless you understand what's going on, you understand the limitations of your tool, which is key. Any tool really just depends on you understanding the limitations of what it can and can't do. But the meter or the scope in that instance is not going to be able to tell you what work the circuit can do. Again, voltage drop testing aside, assuring that the circuit is complete and then doing voltage drop testing, you can definitely assess what you need to from the circuit that way. But I like the test light. Just personal preference is the way I use it. So that's it. Test light is going to be able to load the circuit, demands some amount of current to basically stress test that circuit to say, hey, do we flow current? Now, how much? That's really important, right? What is the normal amount of current that should be flowing through that circuit? And what is the normal amount of current that my test light would flow if I just hooked it up to a battery? You should know that. Whatever test light you're using, and again, incandescent bulb, you should put an amp clamp around it and figure out how much current it draws. If you have multiple test lights, test them all. Write it on there with a piece of tape so you don't forget it, okay? This one's 0.2 amps. This one's 0.02 amps. This one's an amp. You can put some bigger bulbs in these things. They will melt the plastic eventually if you leave them on, so do keep that in mind. Headlight bulb, right, 4 amps, right? That's not quite a test light, but it is. There's tools out there where you can set up the test light in like a plastic holder that's 3D printed. It kind of just becomes a real high amperage test light. But you're going to want to know that to say, A, is it equal to the load that is normally in that circuit, but also for safety reasons, if we're testing computer related circuits, we also want to know how much amperage that test light is going to draw when connected to the circuit, because in the instance of a headlight bulb, that's going to be way more than that circuit is designed to handle. And then you let that smoke out of the inside of the computer, which you obviously don't want to do in testing, creating another expensive problem on top of the other one that you're trying to solve. So do be aware of what your test light draws. But once you know, and if you're able to assess the current that is normally in the circuit, this becomes a really powerful tool. Okay. So again, just checking to see, hey, can that circuit carry a load enough to light up my test light? Now, the brightness of the light is obviously going to depend on the voltage, not only on the circuit, but in the system and the bulb itself. So that's where there is a weakness in the tool of, are you going to be able to tell a 2-volt difference from your test light? I don't know. You'd have to be pretty freaking good to be able to tell that, unless it's changing in real time. I don't think I could pick that out, to be totally honest. So that's where a meter or scope is going to be more useful as far as like voltage drop testing. And I'm not saying this is the only tool that you should use. I'm just making a pitch for like why this should be in your regular repertoire of tests and tooling that you use on a vehicle. Hey, have you ever been faced with the challenge of sourcing, installing, and programming a used control module in a vehicle? I know a lot of us have. It seems to be happening more and more often today with the volume of control modules on vehicles, the cost of some new ones, or even the availability of new control modules. In some cases, used may be the only option. So what do you do here? I strongly recommend checking out SJ Auto Solutions and Tommy Oliva. Tommy offers a cloning service for used control modules to make these things plug and play for the vehicle that you're working on. In a lot of cases, he is also able to source the control modules if you're unable to locate one for the vehicle that you're working on. But once you get connected with Tommy, he's going to offer fantastic support from start to finish to make sure that that control module is going to work in your application. He's also got tech support that he offers through his website, along with some free resources there as well on information about used control module programming. So make sure to check out SJ Auto Solutions. I can't recommend that enough. All right, so most of you know this, you've used it, you got one, either you like it or you don't, but you're aware of this style of tests. But for today's episode, I thought I would share just a couple uses of a test light that make it more versatile than you might think. All right, now again, really important here that you understand the amperage draw of your test light. But for a test light that's somewhere between 100 to 200 milliamps of draw, this is one of my favorite tools for activating a relay circuit. Okay, what I mean by this is quite often relay control circuits are going to be controlled. They'll have either a constant power or ground on one side, and then they're controlled by a module, either by providing power or ground to that relay coil. You can use a test light and provide either ground or power, whichever one it needs, to that circuit to activate the relay coil. Okay, now here's why this is a safer method than just jumping straight up power and ground to that circuit. Okay, well, if you're incorrect and you thought it was supposed to be power but you did ground, that's going to be real bad for the driver in that control module. But if you do it through a test light, that again is somewhere between 100 and 200 milliamps, which is the normal relay coil draw for most relays. There are exceptions. So I guess I should just put a disclaimer out there. There's still a possibility you could ruin a control circuit on a computer this way. So just be cautious. You can research the relays if you really want to and find out what the normal amperage draw is. But I have found, again, if you're in that like 150, 160 milliamp draw, that's the normal current draw for the control side of a relay, so you're usually safe, okay? But also pay attention to your diagram and make sure you're applying the same thing. And then that way, if the circuit normally applies ground to the relay and you're providing ground, you're safe. And then I guess you don't need a test light in place. But anyways, I'll use the test light just, again, as a safety measure when I'm doing this, when I'm jumping it to a circuit that's connected to a computer and I want to test it out, right? I want to be the computer, I want to turn on the relay. I'll use the test light in place. And it works really well. There's still enough current that will go through your test light and through the relay coil to activate the relay. Try it. It works really well. Again, it's got to be an incandescent. An LED one is not going to work for this. Now, the way that I actually found that out was by accident. I was diagnosing a Pontiac G6 with a accelerator pedal issue, and it was a short circuit to ground on the 5-volt reference for the accelerator pedal. And what I was doing is I was using my test light to see if I had a straight shot to ground. And this is another use for a test light, right? If I power up my test light and I touch it to something that I think maybe has a ground on it and it lights up brightly, I know that that is a direct path to ground. And I will use that for checking both power and ground on circuits, right? Let's say I have 12 volts on something and I'm not sure, is this like battery voltage or is this a bias voltage? Ground your test light, test it, touch it. Does it light up your test light or does it not? That's going to give you a real quick way to say, oh, okay, this is a bias voltage, maybe provided by a control module, or, oh yeah, this is straight power. Okay, I've done that on a CAN line before. Both power and ground, right? I'll power up my test light. If I have a no-com and it's at 0, I'll touch the CAN line. And if it lights up, okay, I got either a straight shot to ground or a straight shot to power enough to light a test light. It is shorted to something, right? Either inside of a module or on a wire. I am shorted directly to something. That's the only way it's going to light my test light, right? I understand what's necessary in order for enough current to flow through that circuit to light up my test light, that it's got to be a direct short. Or again, oh, no, this 12 volts is, a bias, or at least it's a resistive short. It's got resistance in between it and its path to either power or ground. But anyways, on this Pontiac, when I powered up my test light, so the clippy end's on the power, and so I'm touching the circuit with the end of my test light to see, is this a straight shot to ground? It activated a relay. And that relay was for the brake lights. And so by determining that, I was like, oh, it has to be this circuit, right? I'm grounding this relay by touching this wire. These two wires have to be touching. Where do they go together in the harness? And then I was able to find the short. And it was a poor wiring repair, and a wire was sticking out from the control side of a relay to the 5-volt reference on the accelerator pedal. And that was how I realized, I was like, oh, a relay is a great way. A test light is a great way to test a relay. There's enough current to activate said relay. I could hear it click every time I touched it. So it works really well. Another way that I will use a test light, and this one you maybe could consider a little bit more risky. However, I've not had any issues doing this. So you'll probably call me up tomorrow and say, hey, I just ruined this network by doing this. But when I'm at a control module that maybe is not communicating, all right, so driver's door module, just did this the other day. I'm going to use my test light. I'm going to check power. I'm going to check ground. Okay, that's what I need. Now, there's communication to this module as well. Okay, now could be CAN, could be LIN, whatever it is. I will take my test light, grounded, and I will touch it to the network wire. And I'll do one of two things. I'll either just listen with the key on for things to ding and the dash to go crazy as soon as I do that, because what am I doing? I have a grounded test light touching it to the network. I'm pulling that network down, but I'm doing it safely. Now, with a CAN network, you'd probably be okay just straight up grounding it, but this is giving you just another layer of safety because the test light, again, is not going to be able to flow much current through that circuit. But it'll pull it down. It'll stop communication. What does that mean to me if that happens? That means up to that module where I am testing, the circuit's good on the communication wire, right? If it's a single wire GM LAN, I do that. I hear everything go crazy. Well, my network's connected here, right? Should I scope it? Is there a possibility for some weird corruption? Sure, that's possible. But what it tells me at least is the circuit's connected, okay? So again, power, ground, and touch it to the network, you're good to go. You at least know if the circuit is connected up to that point. With CAN, if you want to be even safer, you can just jump the two wires at the module you're testing. Jump them together and do the same thing. There definitely won't be any significant current flow through that circuit. You're just jumping CAN high and CAN low. Perfectly safe. I've never seen that cause a permanent issue. But as long as they're jumped, whatever else is on that network ain't going to communicate. And depending on the network that you're working on, there's probably other modules where if you have the key on, they'll respond by doing something. I mean, use your scan tool, right? Have your scan tool right there, jump them together at the module you're testing and see, okay, I just lost everything else on that network. Okay, circuit's connected all the way up to this point. I mean, it's a down and dirty test method. Is it going to maybe miss some things at some point? Sure. Does it work for a quick check? Sure does. You can also use a test light. I'm going to keep going here. To change the voltage on sensor signal wires. Okay, what do I mean by this? If you have a 5-volt sensor, or I mean, it could even be higher than a 5-volt sensor, but if you have a 5-volt sensor and it's meant to output a voltage to the PCM, normally you'll have one of two things on that signal wire going to the sensor. You may have 0 when the sensor's disconnected, and that's normal. You could also have 5 volts on that signal wire, right? You'll have a separate 5-volt wire as a reference to the sensor, but then some sensors will have 5-volt present even on the signal wire that is a bias from the computer. In the case of a Hall effect sensor, maybe it's meant to pull it down. I've seen other sensors that just have that 5-volt bias. I'm guessing it's more for like a circuit integrity check. But anyways, you can take a grounded test light and pull that down, right? If it's a crank sensor and you've got a 5-volt bias and the sensor normally pulls it down, touch it real fast on and off and watch your scan tool. And you can then be like, oh, okay, this circuit is good. I see the RPM. As the faster I go, the faster the RPM goes on the scan tool. Cool. And again, safe thing to do on that circuit. I've never damaged a circuit by doing that. It's essentially the same thing the sensor's doing in that point. The sensor's probably actually just pulling it all the way down to ground where you have a resistive path within your test light. But you can do it the other way too. You can power up your test light, clippy end on power, and then touch it and the voltage should jump up, right? So for a signal wire like a MAP sensor, now you could also just jump the 5-volt reference to it, and that probably would do the same thing, but test light will work as well. And I've done that a lot of circuits to verify the integrity. I'll watch the scan tool, look at the voltage, touch it with the test light that's either power up or grounded, watch for a change. Okay, I know that circuit has enough integrity to read what's happening on this end, and I move on from there. Another thing you can do with the test light, this might be my last one here. I'm sure many of you have done this, where you take the test light, you ground it, and I think you can actually clip it to positive too, but I usually will ground it and then I can do a spark check with it. Now, make sure you're hanging on to the plastic part, not the metal part, but if you're cranking an engine over or the engine's running and you move the metal end of the test light close to the output of the ignition coil, the spark will jump from the ignition coil to the end of your test light in a visible manner, and you can even change the range, right? You can have an adjustable spark tester with that test light, and you can see it and you can hear it and you can feel it if you want to. Stick your other finger in there and see how it feels. That's 30,000 volts. All right, that coil is good. But what I like doing here, this is one of my favorites for when I am by myself. Right, I'm doing mobile work, I'm out in the parking lot, I don't have anybody else around to crank the vehicle. I will take my either a long wire or I have a reel of wire, and I'll take the end of that lead and I'll stick it into the ignition coil, right? I want to see if this engine has spark because it's a no start. I will stick it into the end of that ignition coil. I'll bring the other end of that lead, clip it to my test light, and then I will find the bolt in the door jamb, right? The driver's door. And I'll make sure that it's not painted, scratch off a little bit of paint if you need metal, but you want a good metal surface. And I'll hold my test light about 1/8 of an inch away, 1/4 inch away, whatever. Again, we can adjust the range for our spark test here, and I'll crank it over. So I'm in the driver's seat, so I can reach the key, I can hit the brake pedal, I can hold the test light, and I look for spark. And it'll jump right to that bolt in that door jamb if there is spark, through the wire, through my test light to that bolt. It is a great test to test for spark. If you're by yourself and you don't want to pull out your scope just yet, you're just doing a quick check to see, hey, do I have spark? It works really well, right? Now, again, you can do this under the hood if you have a helper to crank, but if you're by yourself, real quick method to check for spark. So it's a real quick episode today. Those are my uses for a test light. Let me know what you have. If there's something I forgot about, didn't mention here, I would love to hear your ideas or your ways that you use a test light in your day-to-day diagnostics, and how if you've made $10,000 or more from this little $6 tool. And again, $5.95 is the price on Amazon. I'll send you the link if you can't find it. With that all out of the way, let's get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.